Hello and welcome to Ways to Change the World. I'm Krishnan Murthy, and this is the podcast in which we talk to remarkable people about the big ideas in their lives and the events that have helped shape them. And my guest today is one of the best guitarists in the world, one of the most remarkable artists in the world, Jack White. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today. We're actually recording this in a studio around the corner from the Electric Ballroom in Camden, which is the first night in your band, the Raconteurs world tour.
Yes.
What does it feel like to be at the beginning of an enormous set of gigs?
It's nice, but I think back in the day it was easier to sort of get started with rolling on a tour because you could go and play some small clubs, and before people were filming and everything in the internet, you could just go out and test things out. I think you see that a lot with comedians now. Like they have a hard time working up a set because they can't. Immediately it's going on YouTube instantaneously. So when you go there, so there's a little bit of that kind of pressure on you where you have to sort of have it already ready to go from the first note, and that's a little bit hard to do with music because you kind of need to go out and let it get its sea legs and get it warmed up. So you just do the best you can. I mean, I think what was smart from us, we went to Japan and Australia first, kind of far away from home, and tested these things out and see what's working, what's not.
I said to my 12-year-old, I'm going to interview Jack White today, and he was very excited. He went, "Oh, Seven Nation Army," because of course the White Stripes is what you were first massively known for.
Yeah.
And that song has become almost bigger years afterwards than it was at the time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So is the White Stripes sort of history?
It is, yeah. We stopped the band in 2011, and it was sort of. We felt that it probably wasn't going to be happening again, but we thought it's probably a good idea for us to say out loud that it's not, because I'm about to go put out a couple solo records, I think, in the next few years. That's what it's feeling like I've been recording, and so I didn't want to go out and all the interviews have to have people asking all that questions, and I thought, or why are you doing a solo record? Why don't you just do a White Stripes record? So you sort of have to tell people, well, that's the way it is, Sorry, we've made up our minds, so let's just not even bother thinking that's a possibility,
And does that mean those songs don't get played, or do you play them?
When I play solo, I play anything I've ever done in any project. I'll play. But if we're playing with the Raconteurs, this is our band, the four of us, and we only play Raconteurs material. And same thing for my band, The Dead Weather, and the same thing for the White Stripes. We would never play each other's songs, so it'd be kind of strange.
How did music enter your life?
I grew up in a large family. I had about 9 brothers and sisters. They're all older than me. I'm the youngest, and they all love music. A few of them were musicians, and we had instruments in the house. We had drum set and guitars in the house. So that was always around, and I looked up to them a lot. So I wanted to kind of do the things that they were doing and be interested in the things they were interested in. But also, I did have a natural love for music. Just early on, there's photographs of me. I'm young, listening through headphones and listening to records, and I've always been very attracted to it, even at an early age.
But it's not normal for sort of instruments to be lying around the house, especially things like drums. So your parents must have been.
They're very interested in music as well. My dad was really into drummers, and but they came from the 1930s, so they were older and they were into sort of big band music and things like that, and Sinatra and Nat King Cole era. So they loved music from that angle, and my brothers growing up in the 60s and 70s, so they liked country and rock and roll and blues, and so it was a good mixture of everything. And I also grew up in an all-Mexican neighborhood, and everyone listened to house music and hip-hop around me. All the kids my age, that's what they listened to, so it was a good mixture of everything, really.
So you had a very sort of, a Catholic, and literally Catholic.
Oh, yeah. Universal, yeah.
Introduction to music. I mean, you say it was a Mexican neighborhood. How did that affect your childhood, or actually just being in a city in which there was white flight?
Yeah.
And you presumably being one of the relatively few white families who were staying put.
That stayed, yeah. It was strange.
What was that like?
I think it's probably a lot like what it's a little bit like what's for someone who's considered a minority in whatever country they're in, environment they're in, to go to a school. Like I went to an all-Mexican grade school and an all-black high school. So yeah, people of my ethnicity or whatever were the minority in those scenarios. But it's also that isn't as strange as it is to grow up in sort of a city that's decaying like Detroit was. I mean, it was really in massive decay. You felt like you were living in an abandoned building, to live in Detroit. And thankfully, after 40 years of that or whatever, it's finally turning around in the last 2 or 3 years. It's finally having a renaissance.
And is that where the blues came, if you like?
I felt the sort of, I went sort of like from rock and roll to punk and then to blues. It's sort of like trying to get deeper and deeper into the truth. You sort of keep digging and digging through music. You listen to what's around you, and you like the things that you hear around you first, and then you dig more and more. And as you get older, then I got a car, so I could drive to a record store now. And now I can, because where I lived, there was no record store, there was no place to buy a guitar strings, book. There was no bookstore. There was not in the city of Detroit.
There was no bookstore.
No, you had to leave the city of Detroit to buy any of those things. We left Detroit to buy groceries, so it was just such a desert to be brought up in. It's so strange.
Why were you still there? Why did your family stay?
I don't know. I would like to know why. They just didn't want to move, I guess. Maybe it's connected to their church or something like that. I don't know. They just didn't want to move.
So when did you pick up the guitar? And when did you realize you were good at it?
I don't remember anything specific. I thought I was just going to play drums my whole life. I wanted to be a drummer. My whole childhood, that's all I really did was play drums. I play guitar here and there, but think nothing of it. It was just sort of like, oh, well, doesn't everybody play guitar kind of a thing? That has like nothing special about it. And started writing as a teenager, realizing that it's hard to get things going, like to motivate other people to play, like play in a band or play a gig. When you're the drummer, it's hard to motivate other people. But if you're writing songs, you might be able to sort of get people to sort of coagulate or whatever, get together and make something new happen. So I guess it was inevitable for me. I think I had been putting it off for a long time growing up, and I finally gave up and started writing songs.
What were you doing it for at that stage? I mean, were you dreaming of being a rock star or an artist?
No, because even at the point where I was in, I think, 3 bands when the White Stripes broke. I was in the White Stripes and the Go and this other band, Two Star Tavern. I was in 3 bands, and I had an upholstery shop, and I had no thought at all that any of it was going to go anywhere. It was just this thought of, this is what I like to do in my free time, and then I work on furniture for a living, and that's probably what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. That's all I thought of it. I never, even when we went on tour with the White Stripes, I still thought, well, this is just a thing we'll do for a minute, and there's a few people who like it. But that's it. I never had any other expectations about it. So that was why it was very surprising when we came over here, for example, when John Peel was playing us, and Meg and I sort of looked at each other like, what? People like this? It was very strange to us. So we were already 3 albums in as well. So we especially thought no one cared about it, that it was just sort of this garage rock thing. We were wrong, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, you mentioned upholstery because you were an apprentice.
Mm-hmm. And then I had my own shop after a few years. I opened up my own place. And I apprenticed to Brian Muldoon in Detroit, and then I worked in other upholstery shops for a few years as well.
And what was it about that you liked doing?
I think it was just what I had access to. Like he grew up next to me, so he had his upholstery shop in the basement. When I was riding, bicycle, I used to look down into his shop between the houses. So I was exposed to that from early on, and he hired me when I was like 15 to work in his shop and sweep up, and started apprenticing. And so it was sort of like, that was what I knew. That I guess if he had been a carpenter, or if someone around me had been a plumber, I might have done those things. So I think that was just what I got interested in. And I think that the love of designers came out of that very quickly. Like got into mid-century modern furniture, and all the designers like Paul Franco and Ernie Jacobson and Eero Saarinen, and getting into all of them through furniture, and then into their architecture, and then on and on. So it's nice when you can figure out a way like that for there to be growth. Because sometimes when I'd see trades coming up, and I'd work for a carpenter here or whatever contractor there and stuff, doing certain jobs, and you'd see like, oh, some of those just feel sort of like dead end. They can't grow any farther than that little area, or they don't want to, or they're fine with it. It makes them happy, and that's it. And I wanted something bigger and better, but I didn't know what else to do besides work on furniture. So I think getting into design and getting into collecting and getting into, appreciating architecture and all kinds of things, the Bauhaus world and the Mies van der Rohe and all these kind of designers. And that carried on into things like when finally we were able to work on stage and make artwork for records and do the lighting for stage setups and things like that. You keep carrying these ideas forward to the next step if you keep pushing.
You mentioned musically that sort of search for truth in going from punk to blues. I mean, was that What do you mean by that? What is the search for truth in music?
So I suppose if you grew up wanting to be a pop star or something, you might have been like a stage kid with a stage mom or something, and went to auditions and trying to get parts and trying to become famous or something one day, or build on something like that. But maybe the goals are fame and success through money and those kind of goals, which I guess in some cases that's okay, and not trying to completely judge that as completely fake or whatever. But if your goals are to just try to get somewhere very interesting and beautiful with music or art, then those kind of things are sort of off to the side. I think it's nice to sort of not really care about money when you're trying to put on a show, and you're actually more interested in, are we actually going to connect with people and something beautiful is going to happen, instead of how many tickets were sold and how much we sold on merchandise that night or whatever. It's nice to not really be tempted to care about that stuff, and it's very hard, I think, for some people to navigate all that. It's very difficult in all that, because when that's all thrust upon you, you don't get to just be an artist or just be creative. You have to be a good showman, a good business person. You have to be socially able to talk to all kinds of different people, and all these different things that you're sort of need to be able to do in order to keep moving forward. And it's difficult because I think not everybody has all those dozen things. Some people are, Frank Sinatra didn't write songs. He sang songs, or crooned them, to be more specific. But that's what he did well. He didn't need to write them, and Elvis didn't need to write songs. It's not what he was about. But say Elvis had a bad manager, and Elvis was like, okay, you want me to make movies for 10 years? Okay, sure, I'll make movies, when he should have been making music. That's a good example of all the things you have to have lined up in your own persona for it all to make sense.
So how were you thinking things through in a very detailed way then? Because you say you came here, you were surprised people loved the White Stripes. You must have known how startling the White Stripes were. For people watching, you had this, these two people, just two people. Hang on, where's everybody else for a start? With this very distinctive look and a very distinctive sound.
It was something that we thought people who sort of really liked the blues, or really deeper into music, the love of music, would think some of them would get something out of it. But that to us seemed like, that's like 50 people in every town, It's like if you're into like a barbershop quartet, or if you're into like what do you call it, chamber music or something like that, with orchestral stuff. You think there's like a little pocket of people in each town that might like this. But I don't know, coming up in Detroit, maybe if we had grown up in New York or LA or something like that, we might have thought differently about it with the connections or friends we would have had. But we just kind of thought, yeah, that's it, man. You might get 50 people or 100 people to show up at your show. That would be unbelievable. That's all we thought really was available to us. Especially having put 3 albums out before it started to really connect with people. That's strange. That doesn't usually happen to bands. Usually they come out with something, and immediately within the first year of their first album, people say, oh, this is interesting, let's check this out. And that's usually what happens. So that was strange for us.
You were playing, quite quirky, cheap, difficult to play instruments. And you've talked in the past about how important it was for this to be hard work.
Yeah.
Why was that, and where did that come from?
It was I guess it's the sort of maybe the idea of being an artist not being some free vacation that you get to be on. That being an artist meant working 3 times as hard as everybody else. I think that was the methodology I had in my brain, the ideology of what being an artist meant. And maybe it was easier for me to see that because I had my own business. I had an upholstery shop, and most of the people I knew worked for somebody else. So to be self-employed at 21 is a little bit strange. You're looking at life in a very different way, and you're sort of forced to care about things that your friends don't care about. So when I was able to play music for a week, not work on furniture and work just on music, that was a humongous blessing to me. And I took that as, well, I'm not going to just blow this off like this is like I won a lottery ticket. If I get to play a show, if I get to make a 45 or actually make an album, I really want this to be where I've pushed myself to the absolute limits of what I'm capable of doing and see what comes out of that. At least then, if it doesn't work, okay, it doesn't work, but at least I would go back in the future and say, oh, I put a lot into that at that moment in time to try my best at it. and would feel good about that. I pushed myself rather than, we hung out for a few days and everyone got high and got drunk and we had a blast, but whatever. That's an embarrassing part of my life. I don't want to talk about it. That's easy to do. Anybody can do that.
And what about the guitar sound? Because again, you've got this very instantly recognizable guitar sound. Did you set out to find that, or did you just find it and go, that's good, I'm going to stick with it? Or
it happens often with, I seem to read throughout the years, is other people who are self-taught. Because I did have brothers who play, but they didn't sit down and teach me how to play anything. I taught myself from just pure excitement and wanting to be a part of that with music. So when you're self-taught, you do things that you're not supposed to do. You do things wrong. I remember once we got to play, the Raconteurs got to play with Pete Townsend, just as he was doing a radio show, and I said to him, the first song I learned how to play was I Can't Explain by The Who. And I said, but I play it wrong because I taught myself how to play bar chords. I only play with these two fingers. And he goes, that's how I play. So I subconsciously, accidentally learned how to play guitar the same way Pete Townsend plays bar chords with just these two fingers. Everyone else uses all four. And so that was kind of funny. It was almost like that's too perfect of a accident in a way. And but it showed you that he was self-taught as well, and that's those are the kind of things you do. Those are the kind of weird things you do when you're just trying to make a sound that sounds pleasing to you. You don't know the right way to do is to put these two fingers right there. You just do what sounds right, and then that becomes your style, and your sound comes out of that.
It was. It's not always, but it was quite an aggressive sound.
Yeah. Well, it was really a very Detroit-sounding band coming out of the White Stripes, or when we started. That was very minimalism, and the Detroit vibe were heavy duty with all of us. It was, to be on stage in Detroit was almost like you were part of this legacy of the MC5 and the Stooges and these kind of things. You had to live up to this kind of, ferocity with all the punk elements that are coming on with what I was doing. Made it really about, it's not about being a virtuoso, being able to play a million notes or being able to play Bach or anything like that. It's about the attitude that you're bringing to the stage, and the minimalism helped that. So you could just get up and force yourself into this character and force yourself into this scenario where at this moment in time you're in control of the room, and everyone's going to be trying to take part of this thing, and let's all see where we can go with it together.
Did you ever just turn the distortion off or turn the gain down and see what it sounded like, clean?
Yeah, well, that's another part of it too, is that we were very conscious of not trying to have the exact same sound every single time we played a song. It was hard with a two-piece band to do that, but our very first 45 was this very punk song on the A side, Let's Shake Hands, and then the B side was a Marlene Dietrich song, Look Me Over Closely. So we were already immediately playing two different styles of music from the very first recording. And I'm glad we did that, because that sort of set the tone for the rest of it. That these were the parameters of what we want our band to be. Where it's not just going to be these same three chords. And let's see how many different things two people can do on stage. And even more so, it's kind of basically what one person could do, because Meg was a drummer, but she didn't write. So the writing I had to do. So if it was piano or acoustic guitar or whatever, I had to generate the ideas, and that's put you in a different spot. It's like different sort of in the Raconteurs, where you have me and Brendan can write together. You bounce ideas off each other, and you start climbing this mountain together, and you get somewhere. But when you generate it all kind of yourself, it's a little bit strange. There's nobody in the room like to say, hey, that sounds great. You have to sort of tell yourself, yeah, I feel good about that. It's different.
And were you suspicious of technology then?
Yeah, very much. Yeah, because I think everyone in our I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go on.
Everyone in our scene was very anti-digital, because it's just at those earlier days of digital music, the early the 80s and 90s, and the early 2000s were the first years of computer recording. It was not very good. The quality wasn't very good. And it just made everyone feel like that the right way to do things was being lost. And the digital technology was making everything sound really weak, Gotta remember there's a lot of just, it's sort of like if you look back at film and see how something like in the 50s some black and white footage would look, and how some color footage in the 70s would look, and then all of a sudden right around now the 80s, all the footage is videotape, and it just starts to look so, ugh. It makes me depressed to look at it. It's just like, And it's a shame that you grew up in that generation where everything has these crazy orange tones and like sun-bleached colors and stuff. It's just icky to think about. It's depressing. It's like the movie Foxcatcher. Have you ever seen the movie Foxcatcher? It's like they captured that 80s depressing color to me so well, like just that vibe of videotape.
It's much harder though, isn't it, to not use all those things? I mean, are you still recording the old-fashioned way, if you like? I do
record on tape. For most part, I edit on computer, which is sort of like just kind of cutting it up and placing it, which I've been doing for like 20 years, is editing on tape, with a razor blade. And it's just to the point where a lot of that's not necessary as much as it was to me when I was first starting out and learning and first producing records, where it was essential for me to learn that, and I'm glad I did. So I don't feel like guilty or anything about it like that. I'm not that much of a, Luddite or whatever in that sense. But you also got to remember, like when we were being asked all these kinds of things early on, that the only way to really rebel against what was going on in the mainstream was to say things like that out loud, because nobody we knew was saying that. None of the Backstreet Boys were saying that on MTV or anything like that. You're being asked, well, how do you guys record? And I said, well, this is how we do it. I'm not saying that anyone who doesn't do it our way is a jerk, or you're a loser, or whatever, you're a terrible artist if you don't do it the way we do it. I think that's the way a lot of people took it, though. They took it like I was being, insufferable or something, and just, coming down hard on other people's methodology. But no, it's just the end result. If you're asking, like, what do you think sounds better? If you're saying, does that tube amp sound better than that solid state amp over there? Like, yeah, the tube amp sounds better. I mean, you tell me. Yeah, don't you think so?
But it's risky, isn't it, recording that way? Because, these days you can record 10 versions of a line and change your mind about which one you like the best over the course of a day.
Right.
I mean, if you're doing it the old-fashioned way,
you don't have those choices. Gone. Yeah, but that's the thing. I think that's the dangerous part of being an artist. Is number one rule is to know when to stop, and if you have a lot of choices in front of you, it makes that decision a lot harder. I've definitely seen younger artists through Third Man Records have a lot of trouble completing a recording or completing a session, completing an album, because there's too much in front of them, too many choices and too much availability going on. If you tell someone, hey, you have a week to do this and we can only have $2,000 and you have to record this that way, those parameters have been set, and the person, okay, well, all right, so now we got to get down to work. If you tell someone, take as much time as you want, do it, take as long as you want, that's really, that's not a good place to be, man. It's just, I'm not saying you can't create beautiful things under that, and some people can, and my advice to someone younger would be, don't look for those scenarios. Look for the circumstances where you have to fight inside of a box and you have to, work your way towards a goal where you are able to tell yourself when to stop. And that's what reflects what I was saying earlier about it being harder to be an artist than, it should be harder to be an artist than to have a regular sort of day job, 9-to-5 job, because you have to be able to tell yourself when it's time to stop. Do you have the ability to do that? Can you look in the mirror and say, the song is done, the painting is done, the sculpture is done? That, where you never know. You take 10 artists, maybe 7 of them need someone else to tell them, you're done, buddy. It's over, or we're out of money.
Because if you're a perfectionist, then you're kind of sunk, aren't you?
You might keep painting forever. If you're painting and painting, what's to tell you that the painting's done? You can just keep painting if you want. And I think that's another thing with sort of that modern technology too, is it's a very easy to keep clicking and clicking and clicking and fixing. Whereas if you put it onto tape, for me, it was always like, well, that's the way the drums are. They're on there. I mean, we can mix it and change the mix now, but the recording that's it. That got rid of 50% of the choices immediately. Already been made.
And do you get very involved with the other acts on your label?
Or? Not that much, but I sometimes feel like it would be nice to do things the way maybe labels used to be, like King Records or Sun Records, where there would have been someone telling you, no, that's not it. This is the song you should record, and you should do it one more time because you didn't get it. I do think that's missing in art nowadays, is some kind of overseer, expert of some kind, who has a methodology to it. But I just can't bring myself to be that guy. But I do think that that's missing. So you remember like if you were signed to a label in the 60s or 70s, they would have told you, okay, you guys are a rock and roll band, and this is the kind of music you make, and this is what we want from you from this label. We'll give you this much money and this much time. Go do your record. If it doesn't sell, we're dropping you guys. So there's all these things like, okay, well, we gotta deliver the goods. In the era of independent music, it's sort of, okay, there's none of those rules, man. I'm gonna want to be the man. I'm not gonna come down hard on you guys. It's do what you need to do. You guys are the artists. You figure out what you want to do and hand it in. So no one's telling them what to do, right? Are they telling themselves what to do? Are they looking in the mirror and saying, this isn't good enough, I got to get this song to be better. Not in a perfectionist OCD kind of way. There's no parameters coming down on you like, we got to hurry up and finish this. This is our last day in the studio. They don't have that kind of pressure, most people. And I don't know how much people know how important that is to do that to themselves.
So why are you doing all this other stuff? Why do you print records? Why do you all that kind of stuff?
For other people.
Is it a legacy thing that you want
really?
to do?
I really want other artists to be able to do what they need to do. It was sort of when we came up. There was one place where you could cut a vinyl master in Detroit, and that was in Dearborn in the suburbs. There was no record labels in town. There was a small record label called Italy Records who put out our 45s. And I just wanted to sort of have a place where, people could experience that kind of art and enjoy things that are hands-on, that they could hold in their hands and smell and experience, and also be an outlet for where people could produce things. A bedroom label of punk music, you could put out whatever. A rapper, you're recording a hip-hop track in his living room, wants to put it out on 45, that we have a pressing plant that can make that happen and do a small order of 300 records or something. And have it be in the city of Detroit, and have it be a productive, sort of forward-thinking scenario about the arts. So that's been the whole point of Third Man Records, is sort of that. And I'll have my baby steps too. I never really sat down like, this is what we're going to do. It just sort of happens a little bit by a little bit. And whoa, if we did that, why don't we try having a book, our own book publishing company? We have Third Man Books now. Like, why don't we do mastering? Have a mastering studio so we master people's records. Now we have Third Man Mastering just opened this year. So it's great to be able to fund that, use the arts to fund more of the arts, It's all for other people, really.
And because you stayed in Detroit for a long time, didn't you?
Yeah, I still have a house there. Yeah.
Right, but you've moved to Nashville now.
Yes.
So why haven't you sort of ended up in the sort of the epicenters of the entertainment industry, on the coasts?
I got scared of those places like New York and LA and Paris and London, and any big cities really scared me early on. I kind of thought, there's just something about the attitude of big cities that scares me. It's the attitude of, I know everything, I've seen everything, I've done that. Yeah, there's nothing you can tell me that I don't already know about. That kind of feeling, like the first time I went to New York City, it just felt like everybody acted like that, talked like that, and it just felt repellent to me, which wasn't like an absorption of art and beauty. It's more of I know everything, and because I grew up in this environment, there's nothing you can show me that I don't already know about. I don't think that's very, to me, came off closed-minded, all for nonsense. Just because the hustle bustle of the city, just because there's 1,000 people walking around you, doesn't mean you're doing something. That was an offense to me. I'm more interested in people actually doing something, who care to learn and be open-minded and be accepting of other beauty outside there. That was the idealistic thing I had coming out of my teenage years.
Do you think the middle America you live in is it seems to me it's vastly misunderstood, and is kind of caricatured as ignorant, poor, post-industrial.
Yeah, it's got all those things, and it's sort of like people thought bluegrass and hillbilly music was kind of ignorant for decades, and it took artists like Bob Dylan and people like that to sort of showcase that this is really beautiful piece of Americana, that this is a whole other experience in the same country that we all live in, maybe even truer, maybe even more closer to the truth, like the blues and hillbilly music, and rock and roll was sort of really the meeting of the blues and hillbilly music together, sort of in Memphis and in Tennessee. And I don't know, maybe that's what attracted me to sort of moving down there, was that the feeling that everyone really wanted to get to some new place with music. And that doesn't mean, whatever, using the latest toys or the latest technology. Getting to a new place can just be, constructing something and helping something come alive that didn't exist before. So that's a very difficult thing to conjure up, without some, magic spells or something like that. But when it happens, it's so nice to be in the environment or with people who are there, who can help it come to life in the best way possible.
How comfortable are you with modern America right now, Trump's America?
Yeah, it's pretty depressing. I mean, I actually made a rule to stop watching the news because I just can't take it anymore. It was almost like waking up every morning. You knew if you turned on CNN, the word Trump will be on the screen, and it'll be, what has he done now, while you're having your morning coffee. And spend the rest of the day, did you see what he did now? Did you hear what he did now? And now it became this, like, after about 2 years, sort of like, I've given this guy 2 years of my life. Basically, every morning I've woken up and given this idiot my whole day. And it's America's fault for the Electoral College. I think people don't even realize how much of it is that is the problem, is the Electoral College made this happen, but nobody wants to acknowledge that, admit it, and change it. And the people who couldn't change it were brought into power because of the Electoral College, so they're not going to change it because it's going to make them get reelected next time. So it's screwed, man. It's a shame. It should be one person, one vote. And if it had been one person, one vote, he wouldn't have been in office.
Because your music isn't overtly political, but one of the things you have written about is immigration.
Yeah.
Why was that the exception, if you like?
I think that it's just like it's like the hypocrisy of people who, want people to clean their houses and mow their lawns, but they don't want to speak to them or something like that. It's just sort of an ancient hypocrisy that, kick all these foreigners out. The whole country is made of foreigners. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous,
But the point you were making was that the white people are immigrants too.
Exactly, yeah. Everybody in America basically is an immigrant. I mean, it goes all the way back to even the Native Americans traveled across the Bering Strait. So it's a little bit crazy to think about it that way. I don't know what that whole human obsession with foreigners is. I mean, in any country, it's pretty strange. I mean, you see that in Japanese culture and European culture and all across the world, that this sort of basic human fear that's instilled is of people that aren't like us might hurt us. People that don't look like us might be somehow harmful to us. It's such a strange thing that I hope one day they invent some way of getting that out of our system.
What is your role in this culture war?
And not through war. Say again?
What's your role, or the role of music, in this culture war that we're going through right now?
Some people think that all art and music is political, no matter how you cut it. And that's one way of looking at it. Some people, I tread lightly on it, and only at times does it move me enough to go that far, because I come from a different sort of ideology about things. Like, I used to think about when I was younger about being a priest, and I thought, well, I don't really understand if you can be a priest, how you don't just go all the way. How do you only dedicate yourself to God 10% or 15%, 25%? If you're going to do that, if I were to do that, I want it to be 100%. And if that's the case, then you might as well be a stylite monk on top of a pillar somewhere who doesn't speak to other humans and lives in a cave and dedicates his life to God in that way. It was strange to me to see that priests could drink alcohol and smoke, and when I was a kid. I don't give a damn about that now. I could care less. But it's just a funny thing, like those things pop in your head, like what does it mean to sort of be political? And to join the fray of being political almost means a relentless, unsatisfied passion that will never be, the thirst that will never be quenched. And I think I already have so much of that with music and art already, where I don't want to feel satisfied wherever I rest, that to take that on as well, it's just it seems so depressing. Like, just like a cloak to put on, like, because once you fix one problem, there's 17 more right behind it, and it can be very, you can feel very helpless. When you create and you try to be part of a creation, you're trying to make something happen that's beautiful and positive. When you're a part of the sort of the political world, it's a little bit like you're at the mercy of millions to all come together That's a little bit more difficult. Perhaps, maybe I should have I would have had a different calling when I was younger. I'd been motivated towards leadership or something like that. I worked to convince other people of that. But I guess I just didn't have that kind of calling. I think that's why I didn't become a priest either. It was because I just didn't feel like I can feel strongly enough to speak about it now if you ask me what I think, but I don't know if I feel strong enough to walk into a room of strangers and try to change all their minds, even on stage when I play on the mic, I'm playing it, and if they want to take part in it, okay. But
and you feel a bit ambivalent about being a leader, clearly as well, because you lead some projects, but with the Raconteurs, it's a democracy.
It's healthy. It's a healthy thing to do. I mean, I think I've definitely had people tell me, oh, he must be an egomaniac, or he must be a control freak, or because he has everything all on stage, it's all the same color. Oh, he must be OCD. He must be all that stuff because they think that's what comes along with that. Whereas, I actually enjoy myself more in a band, being 25% of a band. It's very cathartic to me to be a cog in that machine. It's nice to add stuff. I've always felt like this is an example I've given over years a little bit, is that I'm this sort of guy, the sort of, I guess, reluctant leader in a way. Like if I walk into a restaurant with 10 friends and the hostess says, how many will it be? I'll look around and nobody says anything, and a table for 10, please. I don't want to be the guy who says table for 10, please. I just look around and nobody else says it. So, that's the vibe I've always felt.
I just have to pick up you said, why you didn't become a priest. We haven't talked about that at all. But I mean, how close to being a priest did you get?
I got accepted to a seminary in Wisconsin, and I was set to go there at 14 years old. So that was a high school seminary, and then if you graduate that, you can go on to be a college seminary to become a priest. And I just felt like at the last minute, it just didn't seem like it was going to be the right move, which is funny. There was a lot of moments there that were sort of coming to a head. I had all of a sudden found this talent for soccer at this moment. When I was 13, I was the MVP of my soccer team, and I had scored 4 goals in one game, and all this. I have not played soccer since the 8th grade. There's this whole change in my life where I went to a school that was all black, that didn't have a soccer team, that wasn't the seminary I was accepted to. That was a Detroit public school. I'd never gone to public school before. It was a definite switch of a fork in the road. And one of the reasons was I also thought I wasn't able to play guitar and bring musical equipment with me to this school. It was a dormitory school, So it was kind of, almost choices somebody that age shouldn't really be making because they're really too big. They're almost too big.
Has the faith stayed with you?
The faith in God has, but not really anything to do much with man, and religion. It slowly burned away, sort of feeling more like all these roads were leading to God, and learning about, Islam, having also worshiping the God of Abraham as well as Judaism and Christianity are all worshiping the God of Abraham. To me, that almost felt like all these roads were leading to God. So early on, that washed away so much of an interest in the methods to get to God. Finding a more individual way to speak with God, I guess.
We do this. This podcast is called Ways to Change the World, and we do it through that prism of making the world a better place. Do you have a sort of a series of things that you'd like to change? If we suddenly put you in charge, if you were the reluctant leader.
Yeah, I think everybody probably would, make these suggestions. I think it now becomes sort of like coffee talk between you and your friends about, look at how this is going, or something like that. A lot of times you'll see now I'm a parent now, so you see things with children, and you see how other people are parenting, and but I think it's almost like instead of global changes, it almost needs to be sort of like small group environment changes, where, for example, like a thing I wish didn't exist nowadays would be how parents try to be their kid's best friend all the time, where that's nice to have, like maybe 50% of the time, and to be friends with your kid. But to see it's almost considered old-fashioned to tell your child no nowadays, when I think that's the most important word for them to hear, and they need to hear it hundreds of times a day, I think. Young children, and that doesn't make you an evil person. It doesn't make, as a parent, mother or father. You have to be able to, you have to realize you know better than they do, and you keep them from harming themselves on a minute-to-minute basis. A toddler will walk around and it can immediately harm themselves moment to moment, and it's your job to know better than them and to say, no, you can't do that. Oh no, you can't touch this hot stove, and you can't run into the street. And that goes on and on for everything, how you speak to other people, the politeness that we all have to get along with one another. These are things that we're supposed to keep carrying on and on. I think there's something in the last generation or two, it seems like people are scared to be, I don't want to be like my dad, or I don't want to be like my mom, and tell my kid no about anything. And that's not good. That's a dangerous disease that I think people think is not that big of a deal. But I think these, 20 years from now, we might see the repercussions of that, People who were never told the word no growing up. It's a little bit of a dangerous scenario. But who knows? You never know. Maybe people grow up and you learn. I know that it was people I knew 20 years ago that were like sort of little spoiled brats, and they sort of grow up into being a really respectable, polite, beautiful people, But that is something that sort of bugs me on that sort of regular level. But on another level, it's just sort of the love of the cell phone gadget. I think it's a little bit, it's funny to say. I often don't really want to talk about it because I feel like I'm the person who's never smoked telling some other people who smoke, that's going to kill you, When I was smoking cigarettes, I always thought, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. If you had smoked and you quit, then I'll let you talk. But if you've never smoked, you don't have any right to tell me to not smoke. I don't smoke anymore. But
what is it about the cell phone?
I just think it's a little bit funny, and I think you see it if you see something like Black Mirror or something like that, or if they show something on TV where you see everyone looking at that in a film, you can see how ridiculous it is. But for someone like me, who is one of the few who doesn't own a cell phone, it is pretty funny to walk down the street and see everyone doing this.
You've never had a cell phone?
I've never owned one, yeah. And so when I'm out there, I'm an anomaly, and I'm looking at everybody, and to me, everyone sort of looks silly, and then you're like, oh yeah, whatever, that's their lives, whatever. Or who knows, maybe this is the way everything's going to be from now on. I have no idea. No, nobody really does. Maybe we'll all it'll turn to implants. Probably it'll turn into a microchip behind our eyeball or whatever.
Because you banned them from your gigs, haven't you? What effect has that had? I'm
just I thought it would be an art project at first, just to see if people would think it was funny or cool, or just a new experience, almost like like an escape room or something like that, where, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we had this arena show and everyone who showed up, we were told them they couldn't use their phones? That would be like, I thought maybe even at first people would be mad enough to demand their money back, and it might be something interesting would happen. To my surprise and everyone around is surprised, everyone loved it. We've been doing it now for over a year, so it's been shocking how much people love it. And it's sort of like, it brings up these real big questions, like, so you need someone to tell you you can't use it, to actually not use it. How sad. That's pretty sad. Again, coming from someone who isn't part of it. And it's easy for me to say because I don't have that addiction, but it's sad to say, if I could say to someone, wow, so if you can't choose to just stop drinking for a day, it's got that much of a hold on you. That's a sad thing, So it's the same thing with that. If you can't just put that down for an hour and experience life in a real way, that's sad. And it's maybe even sadder that you had to be told to do it. That you didn't naturally want to do it on your own. I mean, if I go and sit in the movie theater, even if I had a phone or anything, I would not want to even bring that out because I want to be immersed.
What is it like when you're on stage and all you can see is people holding up their phones filming you?
It's kind of it's a little bit ridiculous for a lot of artists. It's hard to find an artist to say they like it. I have never really met an artist who says they like it, whether publicly or privately. I have never met one who says they prefer it. I don't think anybody does. Even people who love attention, I don't think like it, because everyone knows it's sort of kind of nonsense. It's sort of a great example is we had an example last year. I think we played through like a 10,000 seat arena, and we were sitting backstage, me and the guy who's doing our photography. So we have a professional photographer and tour manager. So hey, you know what? The show got out 20 minutes ago, huh? Go look up on Twitter, type in some words and look up on Twitter and see how many people are posting from the 10,000 people that came to the show tonight. They didn't have their phones during the show. At the end of the show, all their phones were unlocked and they're walking to their cars. So we've got 10,000 people who just had an experience. How many of them posted about it after it happened? 5 people tweeted about it. If everyone had their phones, maybe upwards of 10,000 people would have tweeted about that moment. And you realize what that means. That means a good portion of it, 90+%, is look what I'm doing that you're not doing. See what I'm doing, what you're not doing? That's why people are doing it. Is this competition, voyeurism, jealousy? Those are really shallow human characteristics. Come on, man. I mean, that's not people like, I just watched the best film of my life. I just heard the most beautiful poem. It shows you that if it's not happening in the moment, then it's not worth it to them. So a lot of that is really nonsense. You know, it's sad too. It's funny, man.
Jack White, thank you very much indeed
Thank you.
for sharing your ways to change the world. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did.